a storm, brewing up a storm, brewing up inside, and his eyes are wild and it can't go on. He's brewing up a storm.
If you were to get elected, imagine 5 years down the line, you've just been in for one term. What would you hope to actually make a difference of in terms of Galway?
I think the key issue, which I think links to the issues under discussion, are housing. I think we need to link the need for housing with environmental policies. So things like solar panels, rainwater harvesting, grey water systems, that these should be all part of building regulations on any new build that's coming in. We're talking about building 100,000 houses now to deal with the housing
nationally,
emergency.
and how many in Galway?
Well, we need 20,000, I think, in the
fifth of the national. Fifth of the national.
Well, you know,
or at least it'll be
the main city centres are going to be the concentrated area, I think, where the housing is needed.
We're not going to get them like the boom out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, yeah, that's true. But the population of Galway is set to increase significantly over the next decade, and we need to put infrastructure in place to deal with that. So.
Well, we hear from Leo Varadkar that we're going to need 30,000 extra builders because most of our builders have gone abroad. The people who are involved in the boom. I mean, where are those people going to come from?
Well, I think the reason most of them are gone abroad is because the work isn't here. So, I mean, if we're going to be building houses, then it gives good incentive for people to come back. Yeah, I'm a builder myself, a carpenter by trade, but also an artist. So I subsidise my art through the construction industry and things like that. But despite the fact that there has been an improvement in the situation in the construction industry, it's not like it was during the boom, which I suppose is kind of a good thing in the context of we're not overbuilding or going down that rabbit hole again where developers are going mad. But at the same time, it went too far in the other direction where we weren't building enough. But it's not the same where there's just that level of employment. There's still a lot of precarity within the industry. So. Appreciate it.
Could we ask you what would be your big takes? I mean, again, imagine 5 years' time. What will you have achieved for Galway in terms of quality and in a general sense, and environment?
Well, I suppose in terms of equality, I think we're a very unequal society, and we can see that particularly in housing waiting lists, that it's those who have particular what we call disabilities are the ones that are left languishing on the list for longer. So I would really like to see a public housing model where it is universal design is taken as the standard across the kind of public housing we're providing. Now there are some units that will have to be individually have to be created for individual needs, but I think that there's an awful lot that can be done at the design stage, and I know it's having spoken to Marion about this before, that people who have disabilities are never brought in at that design stage, and that's a huge issue. So I would really like to see in 5 years' time that we have forums there where it's people who actually are impacted are the ones that are making design decisions along with engineers and along with the designers. So that's part of it. Also, I'd like to see, as we have an opportunity now to really change the kind of public transport that we have in this city and across the country, and this is the time to get it right. And actually, in some ways, the fact that we don't have a good public transport system means that we have a better opportunity than most countries have to really get it right from the very start and ensure buses are accessible, ensure that you have audio coming on when you're on the bus so that you know what the stops are, the footpaths are designed correctly. All of these things are a crucial part of it.
Just in terms of welcome and very best of luck in the election, and you're standing on a platform obviously of social values, but in terms of equality and environment, I mean, what would you like to see achieved if you do get elected to the Dáil this time, what would you expect in 5 years to have actually achieved?
Well, first of all, I think the fact is that we need a stronger government than we have at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, they all say that.
No, but this is my first general election, Neil, so I mean, I can actually say it now because I haven't been there before. So I'd like to see something achieved first. I mean, climate action is something that is unacceptable. We're going out to this now, we're going straight out to St. Enda's. And I'm delighted we're talking about this because for the last 3 weeks I've been on doors talking about lights in Atnacara, I've been talking about traffic, and I'd love to have been talking about childcare, I'd love to be talking about a living wage rather than a minimum wage, I'd love we had been talking about proper housing policies which is affordable and social.
Yeah.
I would have liked to be talking about the environment and climate action and what we're hoping to do in Galway City.
It's all lights, and local issues.
Yeah, but you know what? We'll go back to, and you know what? The lights in Atnacara is a key thing. We have to.
It's important, but in 6 months' time, hopefully that'll be a thing.
Well, it's going to be sorted. But I mean, at the end of the day, is that we have to take the bigger picture here. This is a national general election. It's not a local election. You elect local councillors to do local issues, and at a general election, you're looking at people who will actually write policy, and conduct policy, and make policy that will actually change the way they work. So the more, as we go back to the idea of a living wage.
So what would be your headline? What would be your headline if you?
Well, Labour has gone back to what its roots were. We've actually, you know, we've learned from our mistakes. I mean, when we went into government, we faced the worst recession ever to face this country, and we went in and we supported Fine Gael, the former government, and we made really, really hard decisions, and we got punished for those. And what needs to be done now is really, really hard decisions have to be made over the next number of years about our environment and about our economy as well, and where we're going to go with it.
What would you hope to actually achieve? How would you hope to make people's lives in Galway different from what they are within 5 years?
I think what would have to be is things have to be prioritised for any government. For me, housing has to be number one. I think.
And you think it isn't?
I don't think it is, because what we sometimes see it as one issue, and it's actually a myriad of issues. I think it is where it becomes a problem is we are dealing with a myriad of issues. It's not just people in mortgage arrears, it's not just renting, it's the lack of regulation, it's things like that. It's you know, it's traveller accommodation, it's the privatisation of a lot of our public land. I think there's a number of issues that come into play when it comes to housing, and that's why I think when I say it needs to be prioritised, it's that it's prioritised on a myriad of levels, not just homelessness.
Okay.
Because homelessness isn't the only thing that's happening here. Today it came out that, you know, the rents in Galway City have risen the highest in any other part of the country.
I just stop you there, Joe. I'd like to invite Catherine Hanley to join us. No, stay
No,
where you are.
yeah.
I'd like to invite Catherine to join us if she could. Catherine, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I know you're incredibly busy, all of you, at the moment.
Yes.
So if we could just take a couple of minutes of your time.
No problem.
You know, we've been asking everybody the same question, and I'll come back to you, Joe.
No, of course, yeah.
But you know, in terms of you've been elected for TD for 5 years, and you've seen how tough it is, you know, at the coalface. But if you're elected again,
first of all, I was elected for 4 years, and I stand proudly again on my record.
yeah,
And it's absolutely vital that we have strong, independent voices in the Dáil. Over the last 4 years, Group Independence for Change, tiny group, have managed to change the narrative in the Dáil. We managed to pass legislation, stop the investment of public funds in companies that deal with fossil fuels. I actually had the head of the NTMA, not me personally, over the Public Accounts Committee, very honest man, put his hands up and said, we never thought about this, the investment of public monies in companies that are dealing with fossil fuels. We've stopped that. We put legislation, we initiated legislation, unfortunately the government fell, to protect water as a human right within the Constitution, and many other policies. For example, seaweed, huge potential for the west of Ireland. They were in the process of giving out exclusive licences to big companies, to, for example, an exclusive licence for Mayo and Galway, to the detriment of people on the ground. We stopped that process. It's actually holding back the tide. I'm not foolish enough to think, but it's a victory up to a point, and now we need to go on. In relation to housing, mental health, just look at my record and see the difference that voices make. Mental health, we have constant statements on the Dáil about mental health. I look at manifestos and I see commitments to mental health. It's beyond all of that. The vision for change was almost perfect, the document, 2006 to 2016. It just needs to be implemented. And on that,
yes, you're absolutely right. It wasn't implemented, and it wasn't being funded.
Just on that line, just to get beyond all of this, an independent monitoring body was set up. It's set for 2-3-year periods to monitor the implementation of Vision for Change. They did such a good job, they abolished it. So if we're committed to mental health, let's stop talking and to show our bona fides, get the next government to put back the independent monitoring body and let them monitor the implementation of the fantastic document and vision that Vision for Change is.
You know, and literally there's a lot of things which everybody knows could be done which would improve the situation.
Yeah.
Why the hell are these not being done, Joe?
Well, I mean, I think Catherine touched on it, and it's been said all the time, there is no political will. I mean,
to do anything?
Well, I think there's political will only to appease a certain type of a certain type of transport, which, since this election started in Galway, the first transport issue that was broadcast everywhere was build the bypass, and was being pushed by certain people, very much like get Brexit done, this kind of sloganeering. And so what I decided to do was on the doors was I would say that to people and say, what do you think about the bypass? And what's shocking is the vast majority of people who have cars want to leave their cars at home. They don't want to travel the car around the city. And I think when I ran the locals, a lot of people used to say to me that they were getting offended by this idea of Galway as just being a city to drive through. Yeah. And again, I always say this, I'm the third type of transport, I'm a walker. I don't cycle or I don't drive.
1/4 of people get to work and school by walking, yeah. which is astounding for a lot of people in Galway.
Yeah, and Catherine, and many people agree with this. There's many little rights of way that have been through estates around Galway that have been cut off because the buildings have been privatised. Yeah. There's one between Lockatolly Road and College Road that was there for 20-30 years.
Encouraging the car culture.
This is it, and now that's been cut off. And then you kind of find yourself, and I live on Lockatolly Road, I look at that as like one of the busiest roads in the city, but if you're a cyclist, or if you're on a wheelchair, if you're pushing a tram, if you're just walking, you are relegated, not just to the footpath, but to the footpath that is caught up with cars and vans. So I think it comes down to a stage of, we keep talking about, we can do this, it just needs, I honestly think there needs to just be a complete change of government, and money that was going to be pushed into more roads needs to start being put into public transport. But we're going further, we're saying electrify the rail lines. We're saying bring as many other different solutions into it as possible, so that when you're putting it on the table in front of our constituents, they're going, right, so it's not just a bypass on more roads. So there is such a thing as cycle laneways. So there is such a thing as free and frequent public transport. There is such a thing as trains travelling to other parts of the county. I think the problem is the last 20 years of politics in my life, when I've been watching it, is most people look at this issue and only see one or two options. There's a multitude of options we just need to present.
Oh, please, yeah.
Because for the last 20 years, the narrative has been set by the establishment. Those that dare to speak against that are demonised. Climate change is the biggest challenge facing us. It's going to have a huge impact in relation to the proposed N6 project. My belief is it won't go ahead. It can't go ahead if we're to meet our targets. But if we go back to change, the government is really not going to change. So the importance of what you're doing on the ground...
You're saying the government isn't going to change?
No, any government, because they're going to have a majority of Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael for the immediate future.
Okay, we're joined by former Minister Eamon O'Queeve here, maybe future Minister Eamon O'Queeve as well. We'll see what happens in that regard. Eamon, very welcome, and very best of luck in the election. But we're here today, we'll just keep you a few minutes if that's okay, because I know you've got another thing to go to. But we'd just like to know, really, in terms of equality and in terms of environment, I mean, what would you see as being the sort of big ticket issues? Something that you can affect in Galway particularly over the next 5 years if you're elected?
Well, obviously if you're talking about the environment in total, we obviously want to decarbonise.
Mm-hmm.
There's two big areas there that are staring everybody in the face. We'll take money, but we need to do. One is retrofitting houses. Now again, when we're going at that, and I want to be absolutely consistent in this all the time and get the message across, the houses we need to start with, because you have to start somewhere, are the houses that people tend to be in most of the day. Who are they? The old people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're less mobile, therefore they're less ability to keep themselves warm. And the other, obviously, are people with permanent disabilities. And again, you have to look at mobility and say absolute priority to somebody who has, is inhibited in some way in terms of mobility. And you work outwards from there. That means, for example, a lot of social houses should be very high on the list. Then if you look at people who are unemployed, they're likely to spend more time in a house and so on. So we need to do this, but we need to target the money to the greatest effect, to the people who are likely to have the biggest heating bills and also the greatest fuel poverty. Now, if we move on from then, the second issue we need to deal with, if you're going to introduce EVs, and I would have to say I look very seriously at it, but I was told that an EV wouldn't work where I'm living with the mileage I'm doing, and that a hybrid actually would not reduce my usage again because I do 2 long journeys. But if we're going to have EVs, you have to have the renewable generation. So there's no point in putting, say, I'm not putting any gas in the car and then burning electricity and rising gas. So obviously the big ticket item that has to be dealt with, and we have to look after the workers in doing this, is money pipe. That should be just taken out immediately.
Yeah, so obviously, like sometimes the Social Democrats, we're accused of being a social justice warriors party. I think that's because we talk about equality or LGBT rights or environmental issues at all. And so, like, obviously, like, the bread and butter of our manifesto and our policies are around health, housing, transport, environment, like the really important things. But like, we do care about equality and fairness in society.
I know you care, and every politician cares.
Yeah.
But what would you actually like to make a difference in? What would you actually like to be your legacy if you do get elected? What would change?
What kind of issues in particular?
Well, in terms of equality in general, I mean, is there anything you'd like to actually achieve in terms of equality or environment?
So obviously, like around LGBT rights, there's huge issues still around LGBT plus families. So like there still isn't the Family Act hasn't from 2015 hasn't been fully commenced. That would be a big priority for us.
Okay.
To give proper parental rights to LGBT parents who are doing amazing jobs, raising incredible families, and they still don't have the same rights that myself and my partner do. And obviously a big part of my campaign team is from the marriage equality campaign here in Galway, and that's kind of like, that was my start in activism in Galway politics. And so it's a huge part of my team, and really when I look at my campaign, it's much more than me. It's a group of people who are working together to get things done.
But I think the second part, challenging racism, is very important. I think anyone in public office, no matter what level, whether it be local or national, has a responsibility. And the language that some politicians use in terms of travellers or migrants or anybody else, at times is disgusting, quite frankly. And I'm very proud to be from the west side of Galway City, and I grew up beside travellers all my life. I live in Ballyvan, beside a number of travellers as well. And the travellers are no different to me as you or anybody else. And some of this narrative that's used by politicians is quite disgusting.
It is.
And it needs to be stopped.
It needs to be stopped, yeah.
And very much so, you're right, Nora, it has to be challenged.
Yeah.
Because for long enough now, in the year 2020, it's been allowed to roll on.
Politicians surely reflect the views of the public. I mean, is there not a freedom of speech issue as well? Or what are you talking about exactly?
The freedom of speech, yes, of course, but freedom of speech, I believe, should be factual. And some of the language used around, like for example, I've been on site on Harbour, and I've seen kids going to school from there, nearly crawling over rats trying to get to school. Now that is disgusting. And for some politicians and public representatives to turn that around and nearly blame the travellers for that is shocking. At local level, we failed with the Traveller Accommodation Plan, no doubt we failed on that. There was issues regarding traveller-specific accommodation. But what the council were proposing were temporary sites, and I've spoken to many travellers. Travellers don't want temporary sites. They want permanent, traveller-specific solutions. And the executive came to us, and I stood up and said, no, I wasn't supportive of a temporary site. And many people came to me and said, oh, you're anti-traveller. And I said, no, my conversations with the travellers at the time were, they don't want temporary solutions.
They want
They want permanent.
Yeah.
And I'm a realist. I wasn't going to, after travellers in Carver, they were told temporary as well, how many years ago?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
to say we're going to have temporary now again,
A temporary permanent solution.
Yes.
I think in my 6 years in politics now, and before that quite interested in political life, I can see true nonsense at this stage. And for the executive to tell me that was a temporary solution, that would only last a year or two.
Look, I've I suppose had a difficult number of months in relation to, if you like, equality, in relation to direct provision, in relation to asylum and all of that.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this direct provision row in Galway, because I mean, obviously people aren't against, integration, or many people aren't against integration, but they seem to not be happy with integration in their neighbourhood, or this seems to be the...
Yeah, and to be honest, you get that a lot even with the provision of social housing.
You get this with the environment too, of course. You know, I'd love to have windmills, but just not near my house.
Yeah, and this is a very difficult issue. So I mean, there's a lot of politics in Ireland is very localised. People might think it is, but
it certainly is.
Certainly in rural Ireland. So yes, you have the bigger picture, but you also have how it impacts on a local level. So every political party is for social housing, but when they arrive on someone's doorstep, it's not always that popular, and I've seen that in different areas. But at the same time, we need social housing. We need windmills.
Yes, you're in Moycullen. Would you be happy to? You're known as a Moycullen candidate, really. I mean, would you be happy to have a certain mix of social and affordable housing in Moycullen?
Yeah, we're building. Council are building 49 social houses at the moment. Really, the first large-scale social housing development in Moycullen. Besides the Part 5s and a few rentals that would have come on for the last number of years. So again, there's a huge, as we know in every community, there's a huge number on the waiting list, and these are 1, 2 and 3 bedroom houses. There's between Moycullen up to Ardroscahill, there are people on the list. We see them every day, many of them are already in the community. They're living in the community, and we're providing permanent social housing for them, and that's a positive.
You had a tough outing in the local elections now.
Yeah, we had it wasn't a good day for Sinn Féin. But it's actually very interesting to see how people are reacting to on the doors now. I think general elections are very different to local elections, and we can see that people, it's very much economics that people are bringing up on the doors. So it's the fact that to me, a society that can't house its people or take care of its ill, when we look at the hospital trolley crisis and all that, there's something fundamentally wrong with that society. So and that very much is resonating on the doors. People are saying that there's nowhere for people to go in terms of housing, and then obviously healthcare. And I was speaking to one nurse at a door in the Claddagh, and she was saying to me we see health ministers and that coming out every few months or years saying, oh, we've pumped X amount into the healthcare system. The reality is, she was saying, are they not embarrassed, because nothing's changing.
Yeah, like we hear about this. We've been talking to Sean Kine earlier. We've been talking to lots of people. You do get this thing about, I'm in favour of X, Y and Z. There's such a plan is in place, and we put X amount of money. But the reality is we've got no new houses. Is it not about delivery really?
Oh, 100%.
That politicians should be judged on.
Look, I totally agree. And what I say to people on the doors is I fundamentally think that Sinn Féin would do things differently, right? I think we've seen.
Why do you think Sinn Féin are any better now than, let's say, Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael?
Well, because I fundamentally believe in equality. I fundamentally believe that Sinn Féin will deliver what we're saying in our manifesto. I think that we understand that the housing crisis is beyond a crisis at the moment. That we cannot rely on private landlords to create housing for people. We need to build. That's a fact of the matter. The reality is that for a 10-year period, no public housing was built in Galway. Now we're seeing a situation where we're building some. In other cases, I suppose, we're letting developers build them and then we're buying them as a state. What we're saying is we need to build on public land. We're saying
build social housing?
Public housing, so both social and affordable housing.
Yeah, and what sort of mix would you see? Because there's often a complaint.
Yeah, no, I understand that there can be complaints, but we
talk about affordable housing, and it becomes housing for the better off people in reality.
Oh no, but we need to make affordable housing for those people who are working day in day out, just about getting by, paying their rents, if even, and a lot of them moving home is a huge issue at the moment for people, especially my age group. I'm 30. I work with people who are trying. No, I'm not living at home, but I'm 30, and a huge amount of my friends are either away, or they're trying to pay rent. They're living with, in shared accommodation with different people, or they had to move home, try and save in order to try and get a mortgage, and even at that, it's extremely difficult for them to get a mortgage. So we need to have a proper affordable housing scheme that actually caters for people who are trying to try and buy houses. But the reality is that an awful lot of people feel, we've had Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in power since the creation of this state. We've seen it now, obviously, under different guise, but the reality is, they're under different names, but the reality is we've had them in since the creation of this state.
Yeah,
that's a huge issue.
They were called Sinn Féin at one stage.
They were called Cumann Gael and all sorts, but the reality is that's what we've had.